The sky had already turned dark when General Amara Jackson finally left the Pentagon. Her eyes felt heavy after 12 hours of meetings about national security. She just wanted to get home, take off her shoes, and enjoy a cup of tea before bed. She had changed into comfortable clothes earlier, jeans and a simple blouse, looking forward to the short drive home. The suburban streets were quiet this Tuesday evening, with only a few cars passing by. The general hummed along to the jazz playing softly on her car radio, her mind still working through the day's discussions. Red and blue lights suddenly flashed in her rearview mirror. General Jackson checked her speed. She wasn't speeding. With a small sigh, she pulled over to the side of the road, turned off her music, and placed both hands on the steering wheel like she'd been taught her whole life. Two officers approached, one on each side. The flashlight beam hit her eyes, making it hard to see their faces. "License and registration," the officer demanded, not bothering with a greeting. His voice had an edge to it that made her uneasy. "Good evening, officer," she replied calmly. "May I ask why I've been stopped?" "Broken taillight," he said flatly. "License and registration. Now." General Jackson nodded. "I'm going to reach for my documents in the glove compartment," she explained carefully. As she leaned toward the passenger side, the second officer suddenly rapped on the window. "Hands where I can see them," he shouted. "I'm just getting my registration as requested," she explained. "Step out of the vehicle," the first officer ordered, his hand moving to rest on his holster. General Jackson took a deep breath. In 32 years of military service, she had faced dangerous situations in war zones across the world. This shouldn't have felt like one of them, but it did. She stepped out slowly. "Officers, I believe there's been a misunderstanding. I'm General Amara Jackson of the United States Army. My military ID is in my purse on the passenger seat." The officers exchanged glances. "Sure you are," the taller one smirked. "And I'm the Secretary of Defense. I understand your skepticism, but if you'll allow me to show you my identification..." "Turn around and place your hands behind your back," interrupted the second officer, already pulling out his handcuffs. "Is that really necessary?" she asked, still maintaining her composure despite the growing knot in her stomach. Instead of answering, the officer roughly turned her around and pushed her against the car. The cold metal of handcuffs clicked around her wrists. 32 years of service, 4 stars on her uniform, and now she stood handcuffed on the side of the road like a criminal. "Officers, this is completely inappropriate," she said firmly. "I've complied with all your requests." They ignored her, leading her to the curb and forcing her to sit down on the cold concrete. Neighbors began to peek through windows and blinds. A few even came outside to watch. General Jackson felt the heat of embarrassment rise to her face. The officers began searching her car without permission. They pulled her purse from the passenger seat and rummaged through it, dropping items carelessly. "Please, be careful with my belongings," she called out. "And you need my consent or a warrant to search my vehicle." "We have probable cause," one officer replied without looking at her. "Just sit tight and stop telling us how to do our job." They found her wallet and military ID but barely looked at it. From where she sat, General Jackson could see them laughing about something. 30 minutes passed with her sitting handcuffed on the curb while they ran her information through their system. Little did they know, one phone call would soon change everything. 45 minutes had passed, and General Jackson still sat handcuffed on the curb. The evening air had grown chilly, but that wasn't why she shivered. It was the stairs. Neighbors had gathered across the street, whispering among themselves. Cars slowed as they passed, drivers craning their necks to see what was happening. "This is completely unnecessary," General Jackson said for what felt like the 10th time. Her wrists were beginning to ache from the tight handcuffs. "I've shown you my military ID. I've answered all your questions." The taller officer snorted. "Lady, anybody can buy fake military IDs online these days. You expect us to believe you're some big-shot general?" "It's not fake," she replied evenly. "You can call the Pentagon to verify my identity." "Oh, we'll just ring up the Pentagon," the second officer laughed. "I'm sure they're waiting for our call." A small crowd had formed by now. General Jackson tried to keep her eyes fixed on a streetlight in the distance, keeping her posture straight despite sitting. on the hard concrete. Dignity was all she had left at this moment. An older man approached from across the street. "Is everything okay here, officers?" he asked cautiously. "Police business, sir. Please step back," the first officer responded. "I just want to make sure. The lady is all right," the man persisted. "She looks like she's been sitting there a long time." General Jackson appreciated the concern but stayed silent. Involving bystanders might escalate the situation. "Sir, this is the last time I'll ask you to step back," the officer warned. The man retreated but pulled out his phone. General Jackson could see him recording the scene from a distance. Others followed his lead, phones appearing in hands throughout the small crowd. One of the officers noticed. "There's nothing to see here, folks, just handling a routine traffic stop." "Since when do routine traffic stops involve handcuffing people on the sidewalk?" someone called out. General Jackson winced. The last thing she wanted was conflict. "It's all right," she called back to the crowd. "Let the officers do their job." But inside her patience was wearing thin. 32 years serving her country, commanding troops in combat zones, advising presidents on military strategy, and here she sat, treated like a common criminal because of what? A taillight? Or something else entirely? A police cruiser pulled up and a third officer stepped out. He was older than the other two, with gray hair visible at his temples. "What's the situation here?" he asked, surveying the scene with obvious concern. "Routine traffic stop," the first officer replied. Subject was uncooperative. The senior officer glanced at General Jackson, then did a double-take. His eyes widened in recognition. "General Jackson?" he asked, his voice filled with disbelief. She looked up, relief washing over her face at being recognized. "Yes, officer." He turned to the other officers. "Do you know who this is?" They exchanged confused glances. "Says she's some army general," one replied dismissively. "Not some general," the senior officer corrected. "This is General Amara Jackson, 4-star general. My son served under her command in Afghanistan." He immediately moved toward General Jackson. "Ma'am, I am so sorry about this. Let me help you up." Before he could reach her, one of the officers stepped in his path. "We haven't finished processing her yet. The computer's running slow tonight." The senior officer's face hardened. "Remove those handcuffs. Now." "But protocol." One began. "Now." The senior officer's voice carried such authority that both younger officers stiffened automatically. One reluctantly moved to unlock the handcuffs. As he bent down, he whispered so only General Jackson could hear. "Still don't believe you're anybody important." The senior officer helped her to her feet. General Jackson rubbed her wrists, the skin red and irritated from the tight metal. The crowd across the street had grown larger. Some were recording, others talking loudly about what they were witnessing. "I apologize for this treatment, General," the senior officer said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "This is not how we're trained to conduct ourselves." "I understand," she replied quietly. "But I would like to use my phone now." "Of course," he said, shooting a warning glance at the other officers. General Jackson knew exactly what number to dial. One call would be all it took. The senior officer handed General Jackson her phone. She took it with steady hands despite the anger and humiliation churning inside her. The two younger officers watched with narrowed eyes, clearly unhappy about the turn of events but unable to object to their superior. "Thank you," she said to the senior officer, her voice calm and measured. She stepped a few paces away for privacy but remained within view. General Jackson didn't call a lawyer. She didn't call the media, though she knew the story would eventually reach them. Instead, she dialed a number few civilians would recognize, the direct line to the Joint Chiefs of Staff's night duty officer. The call connected almost immediately. "This is General Amara Jackson," she said, her voice now carrying the full weight of her authority. "Authorization code Delta 79er Echo 3. She paused, listening to the response. "Yes, I'm aware of the hour. I'm currently being detained by local police in Riverdale Heights. I've been handcuffed on a public street for nearly an hour following a traffic stop for an alleged broken taillight." She listened to the response, her expression unchanging. No, I'm not injured, she continued. But I am still technically in custody despite showing my military ID. I believe my vehicle was searched without proper consent. Another pause. Yes, Riverdale Heights Police Department. I'll remain on location. General Jackson ended the call and turned back to the officers. The older officer looked concerned. The two younger ones tried to appear unaffected, but she noticed a slight nervousness in their posture. Everything okay, ma'am? The senior officer asked. It will be, she replied simply. 5 minutes passed in uncomfortable silence. The crowd of onlookers had grown. Some had left only to return with neighbors. General Jackson stood tall, refusing the senior officer's offer of a seat in his patrol car. Her phone rang. She answered, listened briefly, and then handed it to the senior officer. They'd like to speak with the ranking officer on scene. The senior officer took the phone with visible hesitation. Officer Thomas Miller speaking. His eyes widened. Yes, sir, I understand. His face paled. Right away, sir. He handed the phone back to General Jackson as if it had suddenly become hot to the touch. What's going on? One of the, younger officers demanded. Before the senior officer could answer, the sound of approaching sirens filled the air. Not one vehicle, but several. Around the corner came 2 military police vehicles, lights flashing. Behind them was a black SUV with government plates followed by another police car, this one with the markings of the county sheriff. The officers looked at each other in disbelief. What did you do? The taller officer asked General Jackson, his voice no longer carrying any of its earlier arrogance. I made one phone call, she replied simply. The vehicles pulled up to the scene. From the black SUV emerged a woman in a crisp military uniform adorned with the insignia of a lieutenant. Colonel. She approached General Jackson directly, offering a perfect salute. General Jackson, Lieutenant Colonel Rivera, your aide-de-camp. Are you all right, ma'am? I'm fine, Colonel, General Jackson replied, returning the salute. From the second vehicle stepped a man in a suit carrying a briefcase. General Jackson, Major Williams, JAG Corps. We've been briefed on the situation. The military police officers had already formed a small perimeter, their presence creating an immediate shift in the atmosphere. The crowd of onlookers murmured in amazement. A third car arrived, this one unmarked. A man in a suit emerged, his face grim as he surveyed the scene. Who's in charge here? He demanded, flashing a badge that made the senior officer straighten, his posture immediately. I am, sir. Officer Miller. I'm Special Agent Carter, Pentagon Police Criminal Investigations Division. We received a report of illegal detention of a high-ranking military officer. His gaze swept over the 2 younger officers. Would someone like to explain why a 4-star general was handcuffed at a traffic stop? The 2 officers who had handcuffed General Jackson seemed to shrink under his gaze. One began stammering. We didn't know, interrupted Lieutenant Colonel Rivera. Her military ID was in her possession. It was shown to you. Are you saying you couldn't read it? General Jackson raised a hand. Colonel. Just that one word, spoken quietly, was enough to silence her aide. General Jackson turned to Special Agent Carter. I'd like this handled by the book, no special treatment. She looked at the 2 officers who had detained her. Just proper procedure. The implications were clear. Proper procedure was exactly what they hadn't followed. And now it would be their undoing. Within 20 minutes, the quiet suburban street had transformed into something resembling a military operation. The flashing lights from various vehicles cast red and blue shadows across the faces of onlookers. The crowd had doubled in size as word spread through the neighborhood about what was happening. A large black SUV with tinted windows pulled up. Even the military personnel straightened their postures as the police chief himself stepped out, his face a mask of controlled panic. General Jackson, he said, approaching her with an extended hand. I'm Chief Wilson. I just got word of this situation. Please accept my deepest apologies for this misunderstanding. General Jackson shook his hand firmly. Chief Wilson, I appreciate you coming personally. The chief turned to the 2 officers who had detained her, his expression hardening. Officers Chen and Rodriguez, my office first thing tomorrow morning." His tone left no room for argument. The two officers looked pale. They stood awkwardly to the side as more people in uniforms and suits conferred in small groups around them. Special Agent Carter approached with a tablet. "General, we've secured the dashboard camera footage and both officers' body camera recordings. We're also collecting statements from witnesses." "Good," she replied. "I want everything done by the book." The military lawyer, Major Williams, stepped forward. "General, we should discuss the potential for a formal complaint. What happened here tonight was clearly—" "One moment, Major," she interrupted gently. She looked around at the crowd of people watching the scene unfold. Many still had their phones out recording. This wasn't just about her anymore. She turned back to the police chief. "Chief Wilson, may I speak with you privately?" They walked a few paces away from the others. "Chief, I understand these situations are complex," she began. "General, there's nothing complex about this," he replied. "My officers failed to follow proper procedure. They disrespected you, they violated your rights. I can promise you they will face serious consequences." "I believe you," she said, "but I'm more concerned about the bigger picture." She gestured subtly toward the crowd. "Those people watching, they don't get Pentagon officials showing up when they're mistreated. They don't have the ability to make one phone call and turn the situation around." The chief's expression sobered further. "What happened to me tonight happens to ordinary citizens every day," General Jackson continued, "and most of them don't have my resources or connections." "What are you suggesting, General?" "I'm suggesting we use this incident as an opportunity for meaningful change, not just punishing two officers, but examining the whole system." Meanwhile, Lieutenant Colonel Rivera approached the two younger officers. "I'll need your badge numbers and full names for my report." Officer Chen swallowed hard. "Look, we didn't know who she was, okay? How were we supposed to know?" "That's precisely the point," Rivera replied coldly. "You shouldn't need to know who. Someone is to treat them with basic dignity and respect." Officer Rodriguez tried a different approach. "We were just following procedure for suspicious behavior." "Really?" Rivera raised an eyebrow. "Is it procedure to mock a person who identifies themselves as military personnel? Is it procedure to keep someone handcuffed on a curb for nearly an hour after they've provided identification?" The officers had no response. Back in their conversation, Chief Wilson nodded slowly as General Jackson finished speaking. "I understand your perspective, General, and I agree. This needs to be more than just disciplinary action." "Good," she replied. "Then let's work together on this. Real reform, not just a press release and a quick fix." As they rejoined the group, Major Williams approached. "General, we've confirmed that the search of your vehicle was conducted without proper consent or probable cause. That alone is grounds for—" "It's being handled, Major," she interrupted gently. "Chief Wilson and I have come to an understanding." The chief nodded. "We have indeed." He turned to address everyone present. "I want all footage secured and preserved. Nothing gets deleted, nothing gets lost. This incident will be fully investigated with complete transparency." One of the military police officers approached. "Ma'am, your vehicle has been checked. Everything appears to be in order, including all taillights." General Jackson wasn't surprised. She had the car serviced regularly. The broken taillight had been nothing more than an excuse. "Thank you, Sergeant," she replied. As the various officials continued their work, General Jackson stood tall amid the chaos she had unleashed with a single phone call. By morning, this incident would reach the highest levels of both military and civilian leadership. And by morning, those two officers would realize that their careers as they knew them were over. The morning after the incident, General Jackson sat in a conference room at the Pentagon. The walls were lined with screens showing news coverage of what had happened. Her phone hadn't stopped buzzing with notifications since dawn. What had begun as a simple traffic stop had become national news overnight. "They didn't waste any time getting this to the press," remarked Colonel Rivera, who stood nearby reviewing documents. "The neighbors had their phones out," General Jackson replied. "It was inevitable. A group of senior military and civilian officials entered the room. Among them was the Secretary of Defense himself, who greeted General Jackson with obvious concern. "Are you all right, Amara?" he asked, using her first name, a privilege of their 30-year friendship. "I'm fine, sir," she assured him. "Just focused on making sure this incident leads to positive change." The secretary nodded. "The president called me this morning. He's following this closely." The meeting that followed was intense. Officials from the Department of Defense, Justice Department, and military legal team presented their findings from the initial investigation. Video footage from the officers' body cameras played on the main screen, showing the entire incident from their perspective. "The officer's claim about a broken taillight was false," stated one investigator. "As you can see in this footage, all lights were functioning properly." "That's just the beginning," added another official. He pulled up a spreadsheet on one of the screens. "We've reviewed both officers' records. In the past 3 years, Officer Chen has pulled over 682 drivers. Nearly 70% were people of color, in a county where they make up only 32% of the population." General Jackson listened carefully as more statistics were presented. The pattern was clear and troubling. "There's more," said a Justice Department lawyer. "We've uncovered 12 previous complaints against these officers for similar behavior. All were dismissed due to insufficient evidence despite witness statements." "What about their supervising officers?" General Jackson asked. The room fell, silent for a moment. "That's where things get even more concerning," replied the lawyer. "The same supervisor dismissed all 12 complaints without proper investigation. We've expanded our investigation to include the entire chain of command." Outside the Pentagon, the Riverdale Heights Police Department was facing its own reckoning. Chief Wilson had called an emergency meeting with all department heads. The mood was tense as he paced the front of the room. "I've spent the last 4 hours reviewing our traffic stop data," he announced grimly. "The numbers are damning. We have a serious problem, and it goes beyond 2 officers." He projected charts onto the wall showing clear racial disparities in traffic stops, searches, and arrests. "How did we miss this?" asked one captain. "We didn't miss it," replied the chief bluntly. "We chose not to see it, but now we don't have that luxury anymore." Back at the Pentagon, General Jackson reviewed the action plan prepared by her team. "This goes beyond those 2 officers," she said. "I want a comprehensive approach. Training, programs, accountability measures, community engagement initiatives." "General," one advisor said carefully, "some might see this as overstepping military authority in civilian matters." General Jackson fixed him with a steady gaze. "I'm not suggesting military intervention. I'm suggesting we use this incident as a catalyst for cooperation between military and civilian authorities on matters of equal treatment under the law." Later that afternoon, General Jackson received a call from Chief Wilson. "General, I wanted to update you personally," he said. "Both officers have been placed on administrative leave pending termination proceedings. Their supervisor has also been suspended." "That's just the beginning, Chief," she replied. "We both know this isn't about 2 bad officers. It's about systems that allow such behavior to continue unchecked." "I agree," he said, his voice heavy with the weight of accountability. "Which is why I've invited the Justice Department to conduct a full review of our department's practices." In the days that followed, investigators uncovered more evidence of systematic problems. What had started as a single traffic stop had opened the door to a much larger investigation. The 2 officers who had handcuffed General Jackson became symbols of a broken system, their names and faces appearing in news reports nationwide. They had no idea that their careers were not just over. They would soon become case studies in police academies across the country on how not to conduct a traffic stop and how quickly justice could come when the right person was wronged. 3 weeks after the incident, the consequences began to unfold like dominoes falling one after another. Officer Chen and Officer Rodriguez sat in the police union representative's office, faces drawn with worry. The representative closed a folder and sighed heavily. "I'm sorry," he said. "There's nothing more we can do. The termination is final." "This is ridiculous," Officer Chen protested. "It was just a traffic stop that got complicated." The union rep shook his head. "It was much more than that. The dashboard camera footage contradicts your report about the broken taillight. The body camera audio captured inappropriate comments. You conducted an illegal search. And now with your past complaint history coming to light, he trailed off. The department can't protect you anymore. So that's it? Officer Rodriguez asked. 12 years on the force, gone just like that? I'm afraid so, the rep replied. And you should know. The state certification board is reviewing your case next week. There's a good chance neither of you will work in law enforcement again. Not in this state, at least. Across town, Chief Wilson faced his own reckoning in the mayor's office. The city council members sat in a semicircle, their expressions ranging from disappointment to outright anger. The Justice Department's preliminary findings are damning, the mayor said, sliding a document across the table. Systemic problems throughout the department. Complaints ignored. Racial disparities in enforcement. All under your watch, Chief. Chief Wilson nodded slowly. I accept full responsibility. Then you understand why we're asking for your resignation? Said a council member. The chief removed his badge and placed it on the table. I've already prepared my letter of resignation, but before I go, I want to say something. He looked around the room. What happened with General Jackson wasn't an isolated incident. It was the result of problems that have been building for years. Problems that everyone in this room knew about but chose to ignore because addressing them was too difficult or politically inconvenient. Uncomfortable glances passed between the council members. My failure was in not pushing harder for change, the chief continued. I hope my successor will have more courage than I did, and more support from this council. Meanwhile, at the Pentagon, General Jackson reviewed the latest updates with her team. What had begun as an investigation into 2 officers had expanded into a comprehensive review of policing practices across multiple jurisdictions. The FBI Academy has requested permission to use your case as a training module, Colonel Rivera informed her. They believe it perfectly illustrates both the problem and the accountability process. General Jackson nodded. Approved, but make sure they focus on the systemic issues, not just the individual officers. There's something else, ma'am, Rivera continued. Senator Thompson has drafted new legislation requiring independent review of police departments with patterns of discriminatory behavior. He's calling it the Jackson Accountability Act. General Jackson raised an eyebrow. I'm not sure how I feel about having my name attached to it. It's going to happen with or without your blessing, General, Rivera replied with a small smile. Your incident has become a rallying point. Later that day, General Jackson met with the Secretary of Defense in his office. The news played silently, on a screen in the corner showing protesters holding signs demanding police reform. You've started something significant, the Secretary observed. Far beyond what those 2 officers could have imagined when they pulled you over. It wasn't me who started it, she replied. This has been building for years. I just happened to be in a position where I couldn't be ignored. The secretary nodded thoughtfully. The president wants to meet with you tomorrow. He's forming a task force on policing reform and wants you to lead it. General Jackson considered this. A military officer leading civilian reform? Not as a military officer, the secretary clarified. As someone uniquely positioned to bridge the gap between military and civilian law enforcement, someone with the moral authority to make hard changes. Back in Riverdale Heights, former officers Chen and Rodriguez cleared out their lockers under supervision. Their faces appeared on the evening news, their names now synonymous with abuse of power. As they walked out of the police station for the last time, a reporter shouted a question. Do you regret what you did to General Jackson? Officer Chen paused. We didn't know who she was. A nearby officer who had been watching shook his head sadly. That's exactly the problem. You shouldn't have needed to know. 1 year later, General Jackson stood at a podium facing a unique audience. Before her sat rows of newly graduated police cadets in blue uniforms mixed with military police officers in green. Sunshine streamed through the tall windows of the Training Academy auditorium, illuminating the earnest faces looking up at her. This was the first graduating class of the Joint Civilian Military Police Training Initiative. a program she had helped create in the aftermath of that fateful traffic stop. "When I look at all of you today," she began, her voice clear and strong, "I see the future of law enforcement, a future built on mutual respect, proper procedure, and equal treatment for every citizen." She paused, looking out at the sea of faces. "1 year ago, I experienced something that many Americans face every day. I was pulled over, handcuffed, and treated with disrespect despite having done nothing wrong. The difference was that I had resources and connections most citizens don't have." In the audience, a few people shifted uncomfortably. The incident had become well known, studied in academies across the country. "What happened that night was never just about me or those 2 officers," she continued. "It was about a system that needed change. And today I'm proud to say that change is happening." She gestured to the diverse group of graduates. "This program represents something unprecedented. Civilian and military police training together, learning from each other's strengths. Military police bring discipline, clear chains of command, and strict adherence to procedure. Civilian police bring community knowledge and relationship-building skills. Together, you're creating a new model for policing." In the back of the room sat the mayor of Riverdale Heights and the new police chief, a woman who had been brought in specifically to reform the department. Under her leadership, the department had become a model for others, with new accountability measures, community oversight boards, and improved training. "Some of you might be wondering what happened to the officers involved in my case," General Jackson said, addressing the question many were too polite to ask. "Former Officer Chen now works at a warehouse. Former Officer Rodriguez moved to another state but has been unable to find work in law enforcement. Their former supervisor took early retirement." She paused, letting the information sink in. Their careers ended not because they made a mistake, but because they abused their authority and violated the oath they took to serve and protect all citizens equally. And because when confronted with their mistake, they showed no remorse or understanding. In a small apartment across town, former Officer Chen watched the live broadcast of the ceremony on his laptop. His life had changed dramatically in the past year. No police department would touch him. His phone rarely rang with anything but bill collectors. The lawsuit against him had taken what little savings he had. On screen, General Jackson continued her address. "But this program isn't about punishment. It's about progress. It's about making sure what happened to me, and what happens to countless others who don't have my resources, becomes increasingly rare." She held up a document. The Jackson Accountability Act was signed into law 3 months ago. It provides federal oversight for departments with patterns of discriminatory behavior. It creates nationwide standards for traffic stops and detainment procedures, and it establishes this training program as a permanent partnership between military and civilian law enforcement. The audience applauded. "When those officers pulled me over that night, they had no idea who I was. They saw only what they wanted to see. And that's the heart of the problem we're addressing today. In a just society, it shouldn't matter who you are. Everyone deserves to be treated with dignity and respect." She looked directly at the graduates. "The authority you're being given comes with tremendous responsibility. Remember that your badge and your uniform don't make you powerful. What makes you powerful is your commitment to upholding the law fairly for everyone." As she concluded her speech, the cadets and military police officers rose to their feet in a standing ovation. General Jackson had transformed a moment of personal humiliation into institutional change that would impact generations of police officers to come. Her name was now associated not with victimhood, but with reform and accountability. Authority. "Without accountability isn't authority at all," she told the graduates as they stood before her. "It's simply power unchecked. You are the generation that will show America what true authority looks like. Authority tempered with justice, compassion, and equal treatment under the law." The applause was deafening as she stepped away from the podium, her work far from finished but her legacy already secure.